Welcome back, everybody. As the gloom descends here in West London, it's actually just about 8 a.m. on the west coast of the United States. And I'm really delighted for this next session to welcome Natasha Crampton, who is Chief Responsible AI Officer for Microsoft. Who is, and of course, Microsoft have been our keynote sponsors for today. And I'm delighted to welcome Natasha, who's going to talk us through the work that she does within Microsoft, focused on building responsible AI. So Natasha, welcome, and over to you.
Thanks very much, Anthony. As we approach the end of 2020 and think ahead to 2021, the importance of a principled approach to responsible AI, even in times of crisis, has never been more apparent. And the hard task of putting those principles into practice has never felt more urgent. From supporting an inclusive recovery from the pandemic to confronting systemic racism, the world and the UK have numerous societal challenges ahead. This year, we took significant steps toward an AI-powered future, and we owe it to ourselves to thoughtfully and intentionally approach what we want that future to look like. Today, I'm pleased to share some details on the building blocks for responsible AI at Microsoft. We've been focused on 4 key areas: a governance structure to enable progress and accountability, rules to standardize our responsible AI requirements, training and practices to promote a human-centered mindset, and finally, tools and processes for implementation. Let's take a deeper look at each of those areas. While there's much that's new and uncharted for the practice of responsible AI, there's also much that can be learned from adjacent domains. And this is particularly true when it comes to setting governance as our strong foundation. At Microsoft, our responsible AI approach borrows from the hub and spoke governance model that has worked successfully to integrate privacy and security and accessibility into our products and services. So our hub really includes 3 groups: Ether, whose research-led working groups provide subject matter expertise on the state-of-the-art and emerging trends with respect to our 6 responsible AI principles. The Office of Responsible AI, which I lead, which sets our policies and governance processes and coordinates the whole effort across the company. We also have our Responsible AI Strategy and Engineering, or RAISE, group, which enables our engineering teams to implement responsible AI processes through systems and tools. These 3 groups work together to set a consistent bar for responsible AI across the company, and then empower our spokes to drive initiatives and be accountable for them. Our responsible AI champs have been critical spokes in these early days because they've helped us scale. Our champs are appointed by leadership, and they sit in engineering and sales teams across the company. They raise awareness of Microsoft's approach to responsible AI. They spot issues, they help teams complete impact assessments, and perhaps most importantly, they cultivate a culture of responsible innovation in their teams. One of the things that's been most heartening to me in 2020 is watching our responsible AI champs community come together. By design, they are multidisciplinary. There are engineers and data scientists, designers, user researchers, and policy people, and they come from all corners of the globe. United by both their desire to respond to the pandemic and do that in a way that upheld our principles, this community is really a shining example of how people on the ground can make all the difference and help to drive that cultural and organizational change that is essential to making responsible AI real. As anyone who works in the responsible AI space knows, there has been a proliferation of principles in recent times. I'm showing here the 6 principles that Microsoft adopted in 2018, and now a world map that highlights how principles have spread around the globe since then. And while, of course, existing laws address some AI ethics considerations to varying degrees, there's no comprehensive law that is specific to AI ethics. There's no GDPR for responsible AI. So the upshot of this is that part of the job of responsible AI initiatives such as ours is to actually write the rules to enact our principles. In autumn last year, we've published our first version of the Responsible AI Standard, which is our set of rules for how we enact our responsible AI principles. We published our first version with an eye to learning and a humble recognition that we were at the very beginning of our journey to systematically move from principles to practices. Through a phased pilot across 10 engineering teams and 2 customer-facing teams, we learned what worked and what did not. Our pilot teams appreciated the examples of how responsible AI teams could materialize, but sometimes they struggled with the open-endedness of the considerations that we'd laid out in the standard, and they expressed a desire for more concrete requirements and criteria. They also wanted more tools, more templates, more systems, and closer integration with their existing development practices. A year later, we're about to preview version 2 of the Responsible AI Standard internally. This version reinforces a human-centered and data-driven approach, building upon strong research and engineering foundations. It's also much more actionable. Teams building AI systems are tasked with meeting requirements that ladder up to goals. We know that our engineers are problem solvers, and we believe this goal-driven approach will help to engage their problem-solving instincts. In time, we aspire to have implementation methods for all of our requirements. These methods will be crowdsourced from within and outside the company and refined through a research-led process. I have no doubt that getting to a comprehensive set of implementation methods will be a cross-company multi-year effort. But for me, it's one of the most important building blocks for operationalizing responsible AI at scale. While the Responsible AI Standard is foundational to our approach, in this fast-moving and nuanced domain, it is still impossible to reduce all of the complex socio-technical considerations into an exhaustive set of rules. There is a well-articulated need for additional review and oversight for particularly high-impact cases. Encountering the grey is inevitable, and there will be occasions when red lines need to be drawn. At Microsoft, we've established a sensitive users review process to help meet this need. Use cases that meet our criteria are reported into our Office of Responsible AI for triage and deliberation when there's no existing precedent to draw upon. Since July 2019, we've processed about 220 use case reviews. And this has included an uptick in cases since the beginning of the pandemic. We saw applications of AI that ranged from chatbots to help get information out to people quickly when our healthcare system started to be subject to more and more demands, as well as for AI-powered systems that can help us better understand the disease itself. And there's really no better illustration of how our use case-based process has informed our more general approach to responsible AI than our work on facial recognition. By deliberating some facial recognition cases that came through our sensitive users process as early as 2018, we established some red lines. For example, Microsoft President Brad Smith has spoken publicly about how we determined that a local California police department's use of facial recognition on body-worn cameras and dash cams in patrol scenarios was premature, and he shared that we turned down that deal. In addition to the open world technical challenges that come with that sort of use case, we believe that a societal conversation needed to be had around the use of facial recognition for that use case. And we believed that laws needed to be established. So we began a process to propose ideas for what legislation could look like in July and December 2018. And earlier this year, we welcomed the enactment of a law in Washington state here in the US. It was the first of its kind because it established guardrails specifically for the use of facial recognition technology by governments. In the US and around the world, we continue to advocate for regulation that establishes safeguards for facial recognition to ensure that people have protection under the law. We believe it's critical that any new laws are grounded in human rights protections like privacy, freedom of expression, and freedom of association, and contain strong requirements like third-party testing, notice and consent, meaningful human review, and limits against mass surveillance. In working through the grey on other facial recognition use cases, we also came to appreciate the importance of some other distinctions. So first, by digging into the details of use cases, we were able to examine how different scenarios have different implications. For example, using facial recognition to access a secure building is a fundamentally different proposition to using that technology for surveillance purposes. And in the UK, like most jurisdictions, the public debate has really been focused on surveillance scenarios. Second, we learned about the role that benchmark and operational testing plays. We need to make sure that AI systems serve their stakeholders well, not just in the labs, but also in the real world. And third, we learned about the ways in which we need to communicate with our customers to empower them to deploy systems responsibly. And by digging into those use cases, new practices have emerged at Microsoft as a result. Transparency notes are documents that we publish to our customers to communicate not just the capabilities, but also the limitations of our AI systems. In many respects, these notes occupy the space between marketing and technical documentation, proactively communicating information that our customers need to know to take action to mitigate responsible AI concerns. Our FACE API transparency note was our first attempt at this new practice, and we now have a growing number of transparency notes being pulled together across our platform operations. There are synergies between our transparency notes and other industry efforts that you might have come across, such as model cards or AI fact sheets. And we're really pleased to be a part of the Partnership on AI's About ML initiative to try and find commonalities between those practices. As we move forward, we'll continue to study different use cases deeply to hone our thinking about how to enact our principles and as a catalyst for developing these new practices. Today, we understand that it's critically important for our employees to think holistically about the AI systems we choose to build. We recognise that the vast majority of our employees today never went through any ethics training, and AI systems raise questions of the kind that Microsoft Word simply did not. So we need to help our teams build the muscle of asking these ground zero questions, such as why are we building this AI system? And is the AI technology at the core of this system ready for application? In 2020, our mandatory responsible AI training across the company reached more than 145,000 employees, and they learned the foundations of our approach. We also introduced Envision AI, an applied workshop for completing impact assessments. Envision AI takes participants through real scenarios encountered by our Project Tokyo team, who are based in our Cambridge research lab. They've been working on an approach to intelligent personal agent technology. Through interactive exercises, our employees have learned about how to design AI with a human-centered mindset. As is the norm for much of our responsible AI work, we built the workshop using a research-led iterative test and learn approach. The feedback has been encouraging, and we're now in the process of scaling Envision AI to more teams within Microsoft and also outside the company. Of course, the kind of mindset shift that we are guiding involves an ongoing process. At times, our teams have experienced galvanizing moments that accelerated progress, such as triaging a customer report of an AI system behaving in an unacceptable way. We've also seen teams wonder whether being responsible will be limiting, only to realize later that a human-centered approach to AI results in not just a responsible product, but a better product overall. We're also invested in pioneering new engineering practices. Privacy and the GDPR experience in particular taught us the importance of engineered systems and tools. As we've been rolling out our responsible AI program across the company, teams have often asked about the existence of these systems and tools. Of course, tooling, particularly in its most technical sense, is not capable of the deep human-centered thinking work that needs to be done in conceiving of AI systems, but we do think it's important to develop repeatable tools and practices where possible so that the creative thought of our engineering teams can be directed towards the most novel and unique challenges, not reinventing the wheel. Integrated systems and tools also help to drive consistency and ensure that responsible AI is in our coding path. It is part of the everyday way in which our engineering teams work. To help with this need, we're embarking on an initiative to build out the paved road for responsible AI at Microsoft. We're building a set of tools and patterns and practices to help teams easily integrate the requirements. We've already made available some of our early work as open source toolkits. I've noted here Fair Learn, Interpret ML, and Smart Noise, which is a differential privacy toolkit. Azure ML, which is our AI development platform, will serve as the foundation for this paved road so that our customers will benefit from the development of our engineering systems and tools, and they'll be baked into that product offering. Looking ahead, we believe that AI will be celebrated for its benefits, but also scrutinized and to some degree feared. We've seen all three of these themes emerge in the UK in this last year, from cautious enthusiasm that AI might help us better understand adverse vaccine reactions, to concerns about unchecked surveillance and algorithms running wild. For our part, we will continue to work to establish the safeguards that allow us to maximize the opportunities presented by AI systems and to mitigate their risks. In particular, we will focus on three things: consistently enacting our principles through the coordinated rollout of our responsible AI standard, advancing the state of the art through research to product innovations, and ensuring new engineering systems and tools, and continuing to build a culture of responsible AI across the company. We recognize that we can't and we shouldn't do this work alone. The leading thinking coming out of UK organisations such as the Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation, the Government Digital Service, the Turing Institute are impressive and important contributions to the global knowledge base, and ones that have shaped our approach. We look forward to continuing this exchange of ideas and working together to build a strong practice of responsible AI in the service of a future that puts humans at the centre of AI systems. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Natasha. I think it is so helpful for people to get an insight into how Microsoft is really trying to put ethical principles into practice on a daily basis and really embed them into the way that you work. So terrifically useful to hear from you And thanks so much for making an early start this morning and joining us. It was really terrific. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. We're now going to take a short break, and before coming back together again at 16:50, so that's 10 to 5, when we'll have the last plenary session of the day, which is focusing on the really big question of democracy in the age of AI, and in particular, the impact of the big challenge of deep fakes that has been explored in some detail over the last year. So do come back and join us for that session, and look forward to seeing you shortly.